Alright, so I'm back, and a lot has happened since the last 50 chapters I read. Before I get to that, I just want to say I'm starting to have a love-hate relationship for Subaru's character, and I will get to it when I get to it. So as for the structure of this video, it will be similar to the previous video where I split it into two parts. First part doing an overview of what happened within the arc from chapters 51 to 100, and pretty much just telling you my thoughts and opinions on how I feel about the way the plot has played out. The second part consists of me doing an overview of 5 characters that I felt had the biggest role or biggest impact in between the chapters 51 through 100. It's just one character less from last video where I had 6. It's now just Subaru, Amelia, Roswell, Echidna, and Garfield. And as I'm writing the script for this video, I'm looking at the thumbnail and I just realized that I should have put Lewis on the thumbnail and I should write her into the script, but I'm way too lazy, so nope. But enough with the super long intro. Let's get into this review / impression. Where we last left off, Subaru was in the middle of fighting the Witch of Envy. The Witch of Envy was able to take damage, and from this damage, the shadow that covered her face came off, revealing that the person behind this shadow was Amelia. Well, not Amelia, but she was at the center of it. And when I read this, I believed it was Amelia at first, but by some accidental research, I found out that Satella just looks like Amelia, or well, technically I kind of forgot that Amelia looks like Satella at least. And so when I thought back to this part, I'm like, okay, what's the chance that that person under that shadow was actually Satella and not Amelia? I'm not gonna also say I think that Subaru also forgot that Satella looks like Amelia, or technically it'd be vice versa, but you get my point. So that's just a random thought from that moment. The story goes on, and Subaru kills himself with the handkerchief that Petra gave him when he left for the sanctuary in the first loop. By the way, I still don't understand how the handkerchief turned from a fabric to a dagger, and I gotta reread that part a few times so I can figure out what happened, but oh well. So now Return by Death kicks in, and so of course he returns back to the original checkpoint. Subaru then awakens Amelia, takes her out of the trial and back to her room to go to bed. Now the next part is where I thought this was the peak for Subaru, because after his encounter with the Witch of Envy, he finally accepted Return by Death. He finally accepted that he was going to die and not have a problem with it anymore. When he put Amelia to rest and went to talk to Garfield about the Lewises that he saw in the previous loop, I can't tell you how happy I was that Subaru was talking down on Garfield. He was so confident, he had that swagger to him to speak any kind of sort of way to Garfield, a man that could kill Subaru in an instant. Oh man, you understand? I was so hyped reading that part. This was the Subaru that I wanted all this time, not being afraid of death so that he can push the plot forward in a faster pace. Which I understand why Subaru necessarily is afraid of death, but you know, you kind of get what I mean. I'm happy that he kind of accepts that he's going to die. But as we progress on, Subaru talks to Garfield about the 2 Lewises that he quote-unquote saw within this loop. Telling this fake story, Garfield tried to test him and Subaru almost got himself killed, but didn't. Subaru finished off this conversation with Garfield, then ran towards the facility that Beatrice transported him to. Arriving at this facility, he realized that it was in better condition than what it was in the previous loop. He figured out that the Great Rabbits attacked on the 6th day, ruining the building. This information has nothing to do with anything, just felt like putting it in there. I had no idea why I wrote this in there. But anyway, we move on to the Lewis Myers and the Lewis copies in the facility. He discovered them, and then the real Lewis shows up. He goes back to the Lewis house with his pocket lolly. Then she explains the situation with all the Lewises. She goes on to explain that the person inside the crystal is the original Lewis Myers, and that there are 4 Lewises that patrol the sanctuary pretending to be Lewis at all times. This part was super good to read because it filled in a lot of gaps with Lewis's character in terms of the trial experience. And you can kind of just go back in the previous points of the arc and you just see a little bit of foreshadowing up to this moment. So yeah, we also find out about Echidna's plan to figure out the immortality, and when I first read this, it gave me a little glimmer of hope that Echidna might be alive, because I think she'd be a really interesting character if she turned out to be alive. But as we all know, that didn't turn out to be the case. After this conversation, Subaru has been up the entire night and hasn't slept, and I just want to say, for me, this really put into perspective how tired Subaru must be and how crunched for time he must also be, because after this he had to leave and go to the mansion. But before he leaves for the mansion, he gets into a confrontation with Garfield, and at this time he has to command authority over the Lewises. And when I tell you I was so hyped that Subaru was talking back to Garfield, and then the Lewises came out of the forest and surrounded them, I was yelling, honestly. I was yelling. I was like, yo, there you go, Subaru. Talk to this man. Talk to him. Like, that's my main character right there. He owned Garfield in that moment, and there was nothing he can do. That was an absolutely enjoyable moment. This version is the best version of Subaru. But let's move on to the events in the mansion, because that we need to talk about. So of course, let's talk about the Beatrice situation. We finally got the reveal on why she couldn't leave the sanctuary, not the sanctuary, the mansion, and how long she's been protecting the Forbidden Library. Beatrice has been waiting and protecting the library for 400 years, waiting on a certain person to come so she can give the knowledge of the library to that person and her contract can be filled. So at first I was thinking, okay, 400 years is a long time, but hey, Subaru is here now, so she can just give him the library. And I'm pretty sure this is what most people thought because this makes the most sense narrative wise. But it turns out the person she's been waiting for which is the reason for her gospel to stop writing things in it, she doesn't even know who that person is. And this is sad because she's been given a duty to give the knowledge of the library to a specific person without knowing who that person is. But this gets even worse when you find out who that person is supposed to be. I'll touch upon that later. So in the middle of the conversation while Beatrice is telling Subaru to kill her, and a certain somebody shows up. The Bow Hunter. And Elsa just introduces herself into this loop saying that she can be the one to kill Beatrice. This is where things start to get spicy. Not gonna lie, for the sake of time, I'm going to be skipping over a lot of details of this fight or battle between these three, or at least rush them. I can't be sitting here all day talking about it. So Elsa takes on a 1v2 with Beatrice and Subaru. Subaru uses his shadow magic to escape the room, pulling Beatrice along. Now this part was so hyped to me because of the author's attention to detail. The part that I'm talking about is how Subaru saw Frederica standing outside Rem's room as if she's patrolling it, waiting for Subaru to come. And then you just get this long monologue of Subaru going through the fact that Frederica is a traitor or might be a traitor, and the fact that she's been hired by Elsa. And it's so awesome to read because it felt like a legitimate plot point in the way that Subaru was breaking this down inside his head, and on how Elsa hired Frederica or Frederica hired Elsa. And you kind of legitimately thought that Frederica was the enemy. But we found out that she was not standing outside the door waiting for Subaru, but was actually pinned to the door dead. It was a sad day. And also, forgot about Petra. She died too, but we're going to move on. To jump ahead, the fight between Elsa versus Beatrice and Subaru resumes, and Elsa actually ends up dying. And you can't see right now, but I'm doing air quotes with my hands around the dying part. But because after Beatrice's hand serves that spanking to Elsa, it turns out that she wasn't dead the entire time. And she's ended up killing Beatrice, which in turn made Beatrice very happy. Then Subaru just passes out. And I think that part needs to be explained on why Elsa just kind of left Subaru there alive. But I guess one could chalk it up to that wasn't necessarily her goal going there, because she was only going there for Amelia. But hey, whatever. Subaru awakens to find out that he's still alive. He buries Petra and Frederica. He grabs Rem and hops onto Petrash's back and goes back to the sanctuary. As he's arriving back to the sanctuary, it begins to snow. Petra, being a reptile, of course, goes towards the snow coming from the sanctuary. Subaru gets off and carries Rem in his arms towards the sanctuary. He arrives and Garfield's the first person to meet him, and he answers the question saying that Amelia is the cause of the snow. Subaru goes to the tomb to check on Amelia to find out that she's been just completely mentally broken. When we meet Amelia in the tomb, we can just see how much the trial is eating away at Amelia's character. The guilt from her past and not beating the trial is just tearing away at her from the inside out. The amazing part of this chapter and the next few is the fact that we finally get this Amelia x Subaru moment. We finally get our episode 18, if you would say, when Amelia said she loves Subaru, and it warmed my heart reading that. Especially as the residential Amelia stan. I love this moment and the following moment that's similar to this. But let's get on to the conversation with Roswell. After Subaru first talked with Amelia, he figures out that she's not the one making the snow, but is indeed Roswell. Him and Garfield go to speak with Roswell. Roswell confirms that he's making the snow. Then he goes on to explain why he did this, and at the time I didn't understand his reasoning. Even now, still sort of don't understand his reasoning behind what he did. But his reason for calling the snow onto the sanctuary was to isolate Amelia. And I just don't understand how making the snow and isolating Amelia will help her pass the trial. Someone has to explain that to me. Please, if you can, please do. Because I just don't get it. But moving on, Garfield burst out in a rage, jumping at Roswell, and then out of nowhere, Roswell just kills Garfield. Or at least he thought he killed him at first. Then he killed a ram, and then he kicked Garfield's head off. Reading all that, I was like, Roswell is a menace. Just completely, just ruthless at this point. The fact that he killed Ram, and I'm just like, he didn't have to do that, but even he said that he kind of regrets doing it, or at least he wished he didn't have to. After the deaths of these two, Subaru and Roswell have a conversation. Then when things start to get a little spicy, Subaru called in the Lewis clone, and the way they appeared while I was reading it. Made me think of like Marvel's Endgame when all the heroes showed up and came in for the final battle. And I can't wait for this part to get animated because I feel like it's going to look so epic. But Roswell does away with the father and sends Subaru flying out the window. Then the Great Rabbits show up, and at this part, you get to see the selfish devotion Roswell has towards his gospel because he completely gives up on life and leaves it to himself of the next loop. Roswell dies and Subaru runs to the tomb to take shelter with Amelia. And as I said before, I love this part when Amelia kissed Subaru. I just want to give a middle finger to all the Rem fans because we finally got our episode 18. We out here. Alright, so the next string of chapters I have to talk about comes after Subaru's death in Amelia's arms. The chapters I'm talking about is the Witch's Tea Party and the second trial. So, sorry, but for the sake of time, I'm going to try and rush a lot of this. I don't have all day, as I said. So, my opinion on the second trial is I find the overall trial fine. That I have no problem with. But my problem with the second trial comes from Subaru's development from it. I don't know if you all felt the same way that I did, and if you did, please tell me in the comments. But I felt that taking this second trial and what he learned from it kind of contradicted his early developments within Arc 4. As I was reading it, I was praying that Subaru wouldn't go down the route that I thought he would, and then he went down it. What I'm talking about is the fact that he's caring about people from the previous loops that had already passed. To me personally, I don't like it necessarily. I like the idea that Subaru would just throw away these worlds and try as many times as he could to get to the right result. That's the Subaru that I like. And when he started to feel some type of way about the characters from the previous loop, I didn't like it at all. I felt that this was a character regression. And this, of course, is coming from my personal perspective because from my own perspective, I would never do something like this, or at least I don't think I would. Then to top this off, the way I kind of feel made it a little bit worse is the fact that these worlds that he is seeing within the second trial is not, they might not even be real. So for me, I was just not a fan of this part. Now when it comes to the Tea Party, someone please, and I mean please explain to me, why is it good for Subaru not to take Echidona's hand? Because I just can't understand. Let me not say I don't understand, because like I do, but let me put myself into Subaru's shoes. If I was Subaru, I would have chosen Echidona because all she wanted was to follow her greed for information by becoming one with Subaru. And what Subaru would get in return would be all the knowledge that she owned and help in any situation that he's stuck in. For me, this is a win-win situation. They both benefit from it. So I don't see why he didn't take it. I don't feel like that was the best decision that Subaru has made. It's definitely not the best decision that Subaru made. But if I was Subaru, I definitely would have taken Echidona's hand because I don't see how this turns out to be a bad deal, at least for Subaru, or at least for both sides, to be honest. Before I move on, I want to say that I love seeing, or well, technically I was reading, the interactions between all the witches, and I can't wait to see the best witch, Minerva, animated. Woo! Moving on from this, Subaru gets his qualification stripped from him. Petras pulls Subaru out of the sanctuary, and Subaru confronts Roswell in the last loop to make the deal. Now, with this being the last loop he could use because of the contract him and Roswell sealed, you know for a fact that he will succeed. Now, I don't have a problem with this predictability. My concerns mostly come from how it's going to be written or how he's going to win. The stakes are too high for him to lose, so therefore he's obviously going to win, especially where I left off at with Amelia and Lewis missing. The author has to write a very convincing ending. I believe and I trust that they will do that, so I have no problems there. But I think that's it for the review of the arc as a whole. Now it's time to get into the character reviews. Once again, I try to keep these short for time's sake, so you know about 1 to 2 minutes per character. So let's get into it. The first I want to talk about is Garfield. So within the last 50 chapters, Garfield has been growing angrier and angrier, but we are real close to finding out why he feels this way that he does. Now, I still like Garfield, but come on. He gotta get over this obsession with the people in the sanctuary. But that doesn't mean that his obsession isn't justified, because I do agree and understand where he's coming from. He doesn't want the sanctuary to be liberated because he doesn't want the demi-humans inside the sanctuary to experience the racism that lurks outside of the world, which is a noble thought, but the way he's going about this way is too radical, I feel. Or at least if you're going to be radical about it and believe in your ideals so heavily, just murder Subaru, Ram, Amelia, Roswell, Otto, and all the Harlem villagers. The only person there strong enough to stop Garfield is Roswell. All Garfield has to do is do a sneak up attack or get close up to him, and he can win the fight. Even Roswell said it himself right before he killed Garfield within like 2 loops ago, I think it was. Roswell had said that Garfield could have killed him in that moment. But that's just my 2 cents on Garfield's behavior within these last batch of chapters. I do think he's justified on his way of thinking, but still feels a little too radical. And if you're going to be radical, at least just go 100% with it and don't try to go 50-50. On the Echidona, I have a lot more to say about her from last time. Echidona, I sort of feel is my spirit animal. if you get what I mean. Well, I doubt any of you get what I mean, but she's my spirit animal, and so is Otto. because her greed for knowledge knows no bound. And during the Tea Party, everyone was against Echidona, and the way she was using people to get what she want, oh, I thought it was great. I was there for it. In terms of what I like as a character, she definitely embodies that. Now, as I said previously in this video, I didn't like Subaru's decision to go with Satella and not Echidona. And Subaru finally peeked into the soul of Echidona and said that she has no emotions. I felt this. Or let me explain. This to me makes for a tragic backstory, quote unquote, because her grief for knowledge is sort of justified now. Because all she really wants is just some information on emotions to kind of sort of emulate a human now. If you get what I mean. Also, by the way, she is sort of a huge troll for what she did to Beatrice, and I'm a big fan of troll characters in anime and manga. You already know I was loving it. So, but what she did to Beatrice is such a troll thing to do, but it's so tragic, especially the way the tone was set up. And Echidona just said she could have just liberate the contract whenever she felt like it, and all she had to do was just give it to a random person, and she could just pick the person. And for me, I was like, oh, there's no way you had your own daughter do a task for you and not know the end goal of that task, but the end goal was decided by your daughter. And like, oh man, just a huge troll. It was right here where I knew she was the biggest troll in the series so far, with Betelgeuse following right behind her. Which, by the way, Betelgeuse coming up in the flashback. Uh-oh, Betelgeuse backstory. I'm here for it. Just gotta put that in. I completely forgot about that earlier. But I'm loving Echidona's character even more. She's actually one of my favorite characters now because of this huge troll that she did. I'm loving her. Next, of course, is Roswaal. Roswaal, he hurt me this arc. Oh well, these set of chapters. I always like Roswaal because he was a fun, lovable guy, and the fact that he kind of stands up for Amelia makes me like him even more. But when he started talking down to Amelia, no. I couldn't take it. So if you watched part 1 of the review, I did say that I did not agree with Subaru hitting Roswaal for what he did, or well, technically didn't do in Arc 3. I was on Roswaal's side there, because I still do and believe that he was right in that position. But when I tell you, I never wanted Subaru to hit Roswaal so badly. I wanted Subaru to risk it all and kill Roswaal in that moment. But it's not even just the fact that he was saying all these different types of names, like half devil and everything, but the fact that he had no faith in Amelia in this past trial, to the point where he was leaving everything up to the gospel and leaving everything up to Subaru to force Amelia to pass the trials. Oh man, at that point I kind of had to bump Roswaal down on my favorite character tier list because I just couldn't get behind the Amelia slander. Not for me. One last funny thing that made me not like Roswaal anymore is the fact that he's still sabotaging things in the background for Subaru after their bet. Roswaal went from GOAT status to trash in 50 chapters. Roswaal still one of my favorite characters. Still is, but he's nowhere top 10 or even, I don't think he's top 15 now at this point. I don't know. I know he's not top 10 for sure. Alright, now we're on to the final 2. The last time I talked about a best girl, Amelia. So I finally got a glimpse into Amelia's backstory. Her turning out to be 107, but her body's 18 years old, but her mental age is 14. It makes so much sense. It really do. I have to give a round of applause to the author, because of the way that he's written Amelia, because I always thought that the way Amelia acted and the way she responded to questions and interacted with certain people, I felt it was very childlike. For that innocent naivety gave away her age. Also, a main principle in Amelia's character is her inability to understand other people's emotions and being so naive to trust anyone's intentions. So I'm not surprised that she turned out to be like the mental age of 14, because it makes so much sense for how I felt about Amelia throughout this entire thing. I still stand with Amelia on her decisions and actions that she made within the previous arcs. So, for example, let's do Arc 3 when she was going off at Subaru after the royal selection. And my problem, if I had to name a problem for Amelia, my problem for her would be that she couldn't understand where Subaru was coming from. It's like, okay, I get it, and I believe Amelia's in the right for this, but can you at least understand where Subaru is coming from? And try to understand that he, at this point, I mean, because he can't tell her about Return by Death, but you can see he's kind of suffering right now. You know something's not necessarily right. This isn't the Subaru that you met back in episode 1. So it's kind of like the fact that she couldn't understand that something was going on. I was like, Amelia, come on, hey, help me out here. But anyway, before I go on to the last character, I want to talk about the attachment Amelia has for Subaru and Puck. As I said before, we finally had our episode 18. It really broke my heart that Amelia felt this way, but didn't really feel this way. Because, you know, she was kind of clinging to Subaru because she couldn't cling to Puck. And that hurt, But I was like, hey, I'll take it. We'll take it. We gotta win, boys. Amelia says she loves Subaru. We'll take this one. But I still am kind of hurt that, Subaru's just a crutch for Amelia, like Puck would have been. So once this arc is over, I hope Amelia genuinely starts to love Subaru and grows into her own independent person, as she already was within the previous arcs, but more independent outside of Puck and Subaru into her own character. Lastly, the man of the hour, Subaru Natsuki, has been up and down for me this arc. As I said during the overall arc review, the first Subaru that we get after chapter 50, where he doesn't care if he dies anymore, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Now the Subaru that we get now, not a fan of. Subaru to me just reverted back to his base character, or somewhat, let me say that. Not fully, but somewhat. It's sort of this blind love that he has for everyone that he meets, if you get what I mean. It feels as if Subaru would go to the ends of the earth for anyone that he cares about, even if he just met them. Well, technically that's kind of basically Amelia if you really think about it. But still doesn't mean you have to like it, but you get what I mean. Please tell me you understand what I mean. It's just kind of like he goes above and beyond for people that he just met. Like for me, it's kind of like, first, can you just sink in a relationship with someone, please, first, before you go above and beyond for him? But Subaru was becoming one of my favorite main characters when he didn't care about life and was talking back to Garfield without a care in the world. That was great. But as soon as he reverted back to same old Subaru, quote unquote. But at least now this Subaru is a lot more well thought out. He thinks heavily about what the next statements that are going to come out of his mouth, his next movements. He's a lot more logical, and now I'm really liking this part of Subaru. Still don't necessarily like the fact that he kind of cares too much, especially if he doesn't even know if these loops are necessarily continuing after he dies. But I do enjoy the logical part of him. So this is the end of the review. I'm looking forward to these last 30 chapters of ReZero's Arc 4. I think they will be very interesting. I know there'll be a lot of information that'll be dropped. I'm ready for that Betelgeuse backstory. Woo, I'm ready. But I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye.